So this isn't actually me dying. This is I almost killed my my dad. Welcome everybody to the podcast to non-relevant, sorry, applicable,
That's
not
not the name.
applicable.
relevant.
And today we've got a really good topic.
What is it?
Yeah, it's really important. We're going to be talking about near-death experiences. Have you guys experienced death?
Nearly.
Once or
How
twice.
close have you come?
Well, that depends. Was it something I did, or was it something that happened to me?
I
Either
think
or.
both count. You mean like, did you
Both.
almost deal death to someone? Is that?
Well, I'm just saying there's a difference between me walking into the road and getting hit by a car, than me in a car and someone drives off a cliff or something. You know what I mean? So one time I was in this car, and I think my brother was driving, and my sister was there too. And ironically, this was the only time I actually read a book. There were these Pokemon books, and I would read them, and I thought they were super cool because you read them the wrong way because they were Japanese, but this was the English version of it, so you had to read it the wrong way. And I'm I hate reading because it's hard. And I was so
But reading
into
backwards, you're all over that crap.
pretty much. Right to left is too hard, but right to left. Anyways, so I was super into these books, and as they were driving me home from school, I was just reading these books, and I just remember the car swerving just a little bit, and then being wow, if we didn't move, that idiot would have hit us. And I just a few seconds after looked up, looked around, huh? And then went right back to reading my book. So, moral of the story is reading can potentially get you killed.
Speaking of that, sorry, I'm eating popcorn right now. I know a guy. All right. Speaking of reading can get you killed, freaking idiot. He was riding his bike and tried to read a book at the same time. Rode into a freaking pole. So you think, oh wow, what an idiot. He's not going to do that again. So he tried to read his book while driving a car. Guess how it ended?
Did he hit a pole, or she, or them?
Guess how many people died?
Zero?
Luckily, no one. Yeah, you guys guessed correct. Well done.
Well,
5 points to both of you.
the idea of near
Uh,
death doesn't imply actual death.
exactly. Gosh, you guys saw right through my ruse. But yeah, he looked up from his book and realized he was driving on the wrong side of the road. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Wow.
Jazz, do you have any near death driving experiences, I guess?
I mean, there's been plenty of close calls. I feel like I get
Oh,
flustered too easily. So there's been some times where I tried to change lanes or something, then I did a shoulder check. Probably as I was changing lanes, saw that I was going to drive into a car and then stopped. And
ooh.
then, I was fine because I did the shoulder check. I should have done the shoulder check a little earlier, just a smidge. But that wouldn't have ended up in death, just like some scratched vehicles. But but then shortly after, didn't notice pedestrian light. Thankfully the pedestrian was looking to see that I was not slowing down. But if they had continued walking, I would have plowed right through them. So that was that was the closest I probably have ever been to dealing death in my life. I am not proud of that.
That was not the question at hand.
Yeah.
There was one time I almost dealt death. It was when I was in San Diego. It was like pitch black on this highway. Like night, cloudy day. Couldn't see anything, right? No streetlights because it's like a 5-lane highway or something like that. I was switching lanes and I was going into the right lane. And as I was going into that lane, I saw right in front of me, it was at least 2 pedestrians crossing the road. that I was like seconds away from absolutely demolishing. And so I quickly swerved back into my lane and they threw a rock at my car.
Oh my God.
I just thought, you freaking morons. I cannot see you until my lights hit you when I was heading directly for you. Like, gosh, it was insane. Like, what are you doing? Why are you on the road?
I had a similar experience to that where it was just like you were in a position where it was like in not in the wrong driving and some pedestrian was just being a complete idiot. You're just like, great, now you could have died. That would have been on me and I wouldn't have been able to get over it. But
Hmm.
to veer away from incriminating car accidents that almost happened, I I remember I was really young. I don't know exactly, but I was old enough to like walk
To
around
drive a
and stuff.
car.
Not to drive a car. Like I wasn't even in school. Like I was that little. And I was
And you're
drinking
driving a car and drinking and driving
I was
at the age
drinking
of 4.
at the age of 4. I was drinking and driving. I was drinking some water and I wanted some ice in it. And then I drank all the water and there was just some ice. So I was like, I'm just gonna like eat the ice. So I like put it in my mouth and would let it melt or whatever. But then I swallowed it when it was little, like a little piece of it. And then I tried to swallow a big one and it got stuck. So I started to choke. But no one was around, like my mom was, but like she was really far away and I was embarrassed because I was like, I probably shouldn't be swallowing ice. But I could breathe a little bit, so I just kind of choked for like 5, 10 minutes until it was small enough I could swallow.
Well,
So that was
Dang.
that was a brief interaction with near death.
there was this one time. I actually thought I was thinking about this recently. When I was a kid, I was probably like five, 5 or 6. I don't really remember the specific age. Um, like I might have been in preschool or kindergarten. I don't remember. Anyways, my family went up a mountain to get a Christmas tree with some other friends that we had. And while we were up there, we did random things like shoot some 22s at some pop cans and rode sleds down the road because it was just a snowy road that no one was going to drive up besides us that day. And we were kind of hiking down the mountain, at least to where our cars were parked. And there was a cliff that was, we were, just for some context, I guess, we were standing on at least a foot of snow at all times around where we were. But it hadn't necessarily been stepped on. And we were by a cliffside that was pretty high up, at least my perspective from when I was a kid. It was kind of high up. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. And I proceeded to lie down and dangle the lower half of my torso over the edge of the cliff because that seemed like a good idea for some reason.
Oh my gosh.
Probably to the absolute horror of all of the adults that were there.
Wait, you mean like the lower half of your
I'm
body?
yeah, I mean like my legs. I said torso, didn't I? I mean
You did say
I
it. Below torso.
below my torso. I was dangling off the edge. So, it wasn't like I was hanging up, but there was nothing to hold on to and I was on snow that who knows if it was on top of actual ground. It could have just broken off and I could have just fallen. like, like yeah, so that was a good time. Um,
Was it you or was it your brother that got really sick at, like, weren't you somewhere on vacation and then one of you got really sick?
um, how sick? What are we talking about?
Oh,
Ebola.
I remember some, like, you were on vacation or something and then, like, it was you. I might be remembering it wrong, but I thought it was you or your brother got, like, really sick or hurt or something.
Um, it's
You talking about the surfing trip where you almost died in the waves?
oh Which one? I,
Which time?
I can't believe you haven't brought any of these times up so far.
I mean, like there was a simple one. There was the like the youth group boys surf camp that we did, and that one I didn't necessarily almost die. I mean, I could have if my board had hit me hard enough. My board hit me in the head, um,
Ooh,
and I was like really dazed, but luckily it didn't knock me out. Otherwise, I might have drowned. Um, so that was a time. Um, not nothing else interesting to that story, just close call, I guess. But no, there was actually a time when uh,
I'm gonna go grab water real
oh,
quick. Be right back.
okay,
No, keep going though. I've already heard
yeah,
the story,
fair.
so it's
no,
all
we
good.
need to pause and wait. He made such a deal of letting us know.
Yeah, well, it threw me off because this was his question. Like he was the one who asked about it.
Okay, okay, so your next surfing story,
Okay,
I
so
guess.
next surfing story, I um I was in Hawaii, and I we were I surfing in Hawaii is different than surfing in Canada because there's a coral reef. So when we rented the boards, they tell you stuff like when you fall, fall flat so that you don't touch the coral with your feet, stuff like that. Because there's definitely parts that are shallow enough for that. Um, so I was like 13, maybe 14, and that made the idea that I might stab myself on the coral or like surfs up, you know, get the little needles in them in his
The
foot,
sea
yeah, from the
urchin.
sea urchin. I kept thinking about that, and I was like, I don't want that to happen to me.
I don't want someone to pee on my
Yeah,
foot.
exactly. So I was really worried about that. Not that this is super relevant to the story. I'm just trying to say I was nervous for some reason, so I wasn't really able to
Okay,
catch any waves
you're
and
surfing in
stand up.
Hawaii and you're nervous.
Yeah, and I was the waves were crashing. They were pretty good today on that day, but the beach was really crowded, so we ended up kind of getting like further and further to the right side of the beach where there was the waves were crashing on a retaining wall. So like the beach
Oh,
got cut off, and then they were like the waves were peaking right when they were hitting this retaining wall, basically. So it looked like death if we got caught over there. And and I was there with my brother and my dad. My brother was kind of a ways away. My dad was with me, and we were getting shoved towards this retaining wall. Um, anyway, so we start trying to dive under the waves with our boards because they're starting to really get high up there and shove us towards the impending wall. And I tried to dive under it, and then the board got ripped from my hands and hit my father in the shoulder, dislocated his shoulder. So this isn't
ooh.
actually me dying. This is I almost killed my my dad. uh, and it still haunts me to this day. I I sometimes think about it, and then I find a really dark place.
Oh,
Anyways, uh, he somehow stayed conscious. I know it didn't hit his head, but the sheer amount of pain he was in, like he told me he was like blinking out stars and just desperately trying to cling to his board. Um, the miracle of that story is that some random guy, like a ways away from the beach, just happened to notice us over there and swam all the way over. And through, I don't even really know how, but it seemed unlikely, but he assisted my dad all the way to the beach, where he could be transferred to a hospital that was on a different island in Hawaii. So, yeah,
dang.
it's a good time. And the whole time I was like, I almost killed my father. That
That would have been an incredible story if you did. Can you
Would it
imagine?
have been?
We would have gotten so many views.
No. I
Could you imagine if that guy wasn't there? If that guy wasn't there for you, Jazz, who knows? You and your dad still might have been trapped out there
to this day.
to this
They
day.
would have made a movie about a father and son trying to survive on a retaining wall.
His
You're
arm
fishing
never
and
healed,
stuff.
so he could never use it properly. You ate
You're
coral.
catching birds and eating them raw, drinking the salt water.
Well, thanks for sharing that deep story that
Oh, sure.
causes you depression.
No, it's
George, do you
fine.
have a depression story?
Sure, there was this one time, me and the boys, not the boys, it was like a young men's group, church youth group thing. All of us, we were climbing up this mountain, and there's this big rock that was cut in half. Like, it was huge, like the size of a house. This freaking boulder. And it was just like split down the middle, and you could like kind of walk through the middle. It was crazy, and we were like, wow, how did this even happen? And we came to the conclusion that Chuck Norris glanced at it.
Of course.
But anyway, we were gonna play soccer or something down there. I don't even know. I didn't know what was going on. I was just following the group, and then somebody was like, hey, Sledge, come on. And I was like, okay. So I started following them. So turns out what happened was this: we weren't supposed to go up here. We just were this extra part of the hike that went higher up the mountain. The rest of everyone else stayed at the rock and had fun. Someone just said, hey, come on, and I followed them to this part that I did not realize at the time that I was not supposed to go on. And I don't know why I was asked to come, because this was before I was strong. So I was the skinny little boy. This is probably the second hike I'd ever been on in my life. I don't remember how old I was, but I was like, I don't know, 14 or something like that. But we were getting up there, and I heard like a rumble, and my cousin like shouted something, and I like looked up and saw it was like an Indiana Jones moment. All right, this huge freaking boulder. It was probably like height wise, it was like a perfect sphere shape. Imagine that, like dimensions wise. Obviously it wasn't a perfect sphere, it was a boulder, it was a freaking rock, but imagine that, like dimensions wise. And it was about as high as probably halfway up my body, maybe the start of my rib cage. We'll go with that. Yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe belly button, we'll say up to my belly button.
So like 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, I don't know measurements, dude. I just go by belly button. So it was about as high as my belly button, and I don't know how tall I was at the time. Again, I was like 14, so I wasn't 6'2".
Oh yeah, at the time. So like
Yeah,
24 Oreos.
precisely. Flat stacked. But anyway, this boulder just came like coming down towards me, right? And I'm looking at it, and it's kind of like it's a freaking mountain, right? It's not like a slide, so it's not going in a straight line. It's kind of going left and right and bumping around and jumping, going off freaking ramps and doing jumps, getting air. It did a kickflip, and it was coming towards me. And I was like sitting there trying to, oh, do I dodge left, dodge right? I don't know. I was sitting there, and then I kind of relaxed a second. I was like, oh no, it's rolling off to the side. It's all good. Sharp turn right towards me. I was like, so I freaking sprint, jump, ninja hopped over this fence to my right as it, like, I thought it hit me, honestly. I acted so fast. It was fight or flight, dude. I just freaking ninja jumped over this fence. I didn't even know the fence was there. I just and dodged the boulder. In my head, I thought this thing just freaking took my legs off. And I landed on the other side, and the boulder kept rolling down, and I yelled down at them, like, hey guys, down there, don't freaking die. And then the boulder hit a tree and stopped, and then I heard somebody just be like, hey, don't do that. And we're like, thanks for the freaking tip, buddy. Gosh darn. And then this guy, when I freaking jumped over the fence, though, the cliff that we were hiking up, it was really steep, especially on the other side of this fence, like real steep. So I couldn't just stop. I was like, my feet were slipping, so I was running sideways across this wall, like freaking Prince of Persia wall running. Except obviously it wasn't, straight up and down. So wasn't as cool as I'm making it sound. But that's what I was doing, right? Because if I stopped running, I would have fallen. And this dude who was like 17 at the time freaking caught my arm and like saved me. And he was like, bro, that was so cool. You like ninja jumped over that thing, which I think was an act of God. Because I, I didn't know the fence was there. And like, I don't know how the jump looked so cool and action movie like when I thought my legs got taken off. And so he caught me and I was all good. And I went to my cousin who yelled at me about the boulder, warned me that was coming for me. And I was like, hey man, like, where did that boulder come from? And he said, and I want you guys to know that to this day, I think he lied to me. He said, yeah, I kicked this like small rock and then it hit a bigger rock and then that rock hit a bigger rock and then that rock hit the boulder that came tumbling down. And I was like, I didn't like accuse him of lying at the time, but that is some cartoon bullcrap right there. Like, what do you mean you kicked a small rock and it just dominoed these bigger rocks? Like, what?
He
No.
let an
He
intrusive.
shoved that freaking boulder down the mountain towards me and realized he might kill me, so he decided to warn me after he had pushed this thing to my death.
He let the intrusive
Wow.
thoughts win. He probably walked up to it like, I wonder how easy this thing is to move, and then lifted it a little bit, and then it just started rolling, and he was like, oh.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I was
just
just playing
killed
with
a
these
man.
tiny rocks.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I just kicked this small rock and it hit a bigger one, which hit a bigger one, which hit the boulder. Like, no, yeah, freaking right, dude.
You know what I always think is crazy about these types of stories and youth group, young men's, or whatever you want to call it, is that you go home and then your mom's like, "How was young men's?" And you're like, "Nah, it was fine."
Actually, yeah, I was told not to tell my parents. In the car ride home, I actually decided, I was like, no, that was kind of cool. I'm going to tell my mom. Obviously, the average mother would freak out. My mom, all she said was like, did it stop rolling? I said, yeah. She's like, good. So it's not going to like come and hit our cars. We're driving past this mountain, right? I'm like, no. She's like, okay, good. And that was it. And I was like, Mom, I almost freaking died.
Your mom's up there pushing the big rock. That is great. I've never heard that before. That is pretty insane.
I don't think I've ever told that story. No, have I? I don't think I've ever told that story as far as I can remember. It's
I
the
feel
first
like
time
I would remember that one.
I've heard about the boulder story.
Yeah, okay, well, there we go.
Yeah.
You might have been there.
I wasn't there.
Down there at the rock, no? Okay.
He was in
Might have been
Hawaii
before
killing
you
his dad.
existed.
Or maybe it happened, but
Yeah.
I wasn't.
No, I think it was actually before you.
Yeah,
you
I
came
really don't
down
think I was in
to
the
where we were.
presence.
I think you were still up north. But uh also one time me and Jazz in a car with the missionaries, they were driving. And I don't know what the missionary was doing. He was like using his phone while driving or something. I don't know. But his companion grabbed the wheel and dodged a semi truck. And he was like, bro, I just saved all your lives. And I was like, sweet. And then I met him a year later and he was like, yo, I remember you. And I was like, yo, I remember you. You saved my life from that semi truck we were driving. He was like, oh, yeah. It was a good time. But when I think of a near-death experience, two things come to mind, which is first off the boulder, because it was the first time I ever almost died. And secondly, when I was in Calgary, when I was installing security systems, I was really tired and sleep deprived always because, you'd wake up at like 8 and then you'd start your job sometimes pretty much immediately. And then you'd work until like 3 in the morning sometimes and then wake up at 8 again. And it was just nothing but hell the whole time I was there. And so I was real tired, right? And so sometimes I'd be driving and I would get real tired and I learned to pull over and like just rest for a minute before continuing. Who cares if I show up late? It's better than dying. But I hadn't learned this yet, so I fell asleep on the highway 3 times and twice at a red light. And so I would be driving and I'd feel tired and I'd wake up and I'm about to slam into this white van and I freaking dodge it back into my lane. I was like, holy crap, if I did not open my eyes when I did, I would have crashed my vehicle. But luckily I don't remember the third time, honestly, because I was so sleep deprived. I don't even remember. I just remembered it happened. But the first time I like woke up and I was like driving, like drifting between the lanes on like a big wide turn. Luckily there was no other cars around me, but like my foot was like resting on the brake, so I was slowly slowing down. Probably saved my life because I was on a turn, so if my foot was resting on the acceleration, I would have driven off the highway. But yeah, I woke up and I was like, oh, nah, that's not good. And then, yeah, I also woke up to the car behind me honking when the light turned green. But my favorite part was after all these experiences, um, I was taking a nap waiting to get called to do an install. And I drove to a park and I just parked my car beside this park and I sat there and turned my car off and everything, and I laid down to go to sleep, and I slept, and there was a car that there are other cars that showed up and parked around me, and they were parked pretty close. So this car that parked in front of me parked like literally like 3 inches in front of my car. And so I woke up and saw that and thought I was on the highway, and I freaked out and slammed my brake.
Oh my
Because I thought
gosh.
I was about to die. But I wasn't. I was parked by the park. And then I went back to sleep and did it 3 more times.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then the car behind me was also parked like 3 inches behind me. And so I was almost trapped. I barely made it out. I like backed up as far as I possibly could without smashing the vehicle behind me, and then I just kind of squeezed out the front, almost hitting the car in front of me. But yeah, screw those guys for parking an inch away from me on both sides.
I
Like,
had a
gosh darn.
park.
Yeah, like I have a job to do in a minute here. Like, I gotta get out of this
Jeez.
like parking spot, man. Like, what are you doing?
So there was another time. I have another surfing story. That's what I meant to say. Um, Surprisingly, actually, I don't think this one I was surfing. We were probably just body boarding, boogie boarding, or something. This was a different occasion than I was in Hawaii.
Jeez,
Which,
money bags over
well,
here.
it sounds like my family went on vacation 2 times, and it was to Hawaii both of those times.
Other than that, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean, we visited family, and those were our vacations.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, but we were fortunate enough to go to Hawaii. Anyways, uh, it's not that complicated of a story. I was just trying to just swim around in the waves. I thought it was really fun. I think I was 12 or something, and I was diving into the waves, and the waves that they were crashing right on the beach, basically. So you were like right before it crashed, the water you were standing on was like, I don't know, half of a foot deep, and it was being whisked away from you towards the giant wave that was forming, and then it would crash onto the beach, onto like a really thin layer of water. And I got caught in that. And I was trying to leave because all of a sudden it turned from me having fun to the feeling of drowning. Like I was struggling to get air because the next wave would come and had to try and dive into it, but I couldn't get away from the waves because it would crash on me, and they were pretty big. Um, yeah, and it was like that for a solid 7 minutes. It's Doesn't seem like that long a time, but when you're barely breathing, it feels like a really long time, especially as a kid. Um, yeah, and then this time, like at some point when I realized I was running out of energy. Like I was starting to feel faint. Like I couldn't dive into the waves anymore because it felt like I was gonna just fall over. I was a really scrawny kid. Anyways, a mysterious man showed up. He had webbed hand gloves on, and he started just encouraging me. He didn't actually touch me. That sounds weird. He didn't like grab me and bring me out of the waves. he just he just was like, all right, we're gonna dive in right now. And he was like a guide. You know, he was telling me exactly the right time to dive into the waves and exactly
you're
when
like
to try and get
drowning.
away. Yeah, well, I probably it probably looked a lot worse. Like I kind of felt like I knew the right time to dive, but I was probably wrong. Anyways, yeah, with this man's help, I was able to escape certain death, uncertain death. I probably would have been resuscitated or something. I don't know.
By that man that didn't touch you.
Yes, the man that didn't touch me. I should, if I wrote a book about it, that's what I'd call it.
The man that didn't touch you.
That,
The man
that
that
didn't
almost
touch
touched
me.
me.
By Jazz.
I just picture you just like face down in the sand, the waves going over you, and this guy with like the webbed hand gloves, just like, alrighty, boy, you can do this, and you're just laying there drowning.
I mean, I did actually. This wasn't the same time, but this was on a different beach on the same occasion. I did get a face full of sand because it was like a similar situation, but I wasn't as out of control. Except I dove into the wave like way too late, and the wave carried me at like the cusp of it falling over about to crash. Like I remember just being like trying to dive into the wave. I got lifted up by the water. It spun me around a little bit, and I remember I was like, well, it felt like I was 10 feet off the ground. It was probably like 5 feet or something stupid. And I was looking at the sand. like, like it was just threw me into the sand. It was thin water with sand. It knocked the air out of my lungs, and I tried to inhale immediately, and I inhaled sand and water, and also all that
Oh,
stuff got shoved into my stomach as well. So I drank a lot of salt water that day.
ooh,
That was a good time.
yikes.
I believe it or not, but I do look at Hawaii positively.
Were there any good stories that you had there?
um,
Were they all drowning and mysterious men saving you?
well, these are all good stories because they do not end in death. That's
True.
what I'm thinking.
That is, and that was the topic
There was
for
plenty
this
of
episode.
relaxing and shuffleboard.
Okay. Well, thanks for watching this one. You know, a nice little shorter one for you this week. Hope you enjoyed all our near-death experiences, got to know us a little bit better, and this has been the Non-Applicable Podcast. Have a good night, everyone, or morning, depending on when you're listening to this. See ya.